So in this video, we're going to be talking about why your street photography images might suck. Now, I've been going through, I'm trying to create a blog. I'm trying to write blogs. I'm not very good at it, and I've been going through all my old images, and I've kind of come to a strict thing, a strict pattern that I'm looking for to decide whether or not my images are any good. So you might be looking through your street photography images and say, right, no, that's crap, that's crap, that's crap. And this might be why your images suck like mine do. So we're going to get into that now. We're going to look at some of my images which I feel just don't work, and we're going to analyse why they don't work. And then we're going to look at some of the ones at the end which I feel like do work, and then look at the strengths and weaknesses of them and work out why they work, why I like them images. And obviously if you can apply that then to your photographs, hopefully in the future when you're going through and you're doing your street photography, you'll be able to use this method. Now, if you haven't already checked out F8 magazine, please do so. This is my publication, but you can feature your images in it. So this is a monthly publication with featured photographers, interviews, and featured cities from all around the world. So it's a 36-page publication. So it's got some really, really nice images and the backstory. It's dead important to hear the backstories about an image, so you can actually appreciate what the photographer found interesting about a scene, and you can learn from it. So yeah, that is what we're going to be talking about today in this video, is what you find interesting about a photograph, because crucially, an interesting picture is what makes a good photograph. Now, that isn't just street photography. That can be landscape photography, it can be travel photography, it can be anything. Wedding photography, you've got to be able to look at that photograph and see what the intention of the photographer was. Why did they take the photograph? What did they find interesting? Is it something funny? Is it something that they just like the light? Is there a good story there? Is the composition good? What is it about it? So if you're looking at a photograph, always work out instantly, within half a second, you should be able to see what the photographer was taking a picture of and what the intent was. And if there's any mistakes, you'll say, well, to me, it's not really an interesting photograph, don't like it, delete it. But be really strict. And obviously we're going to go through and analyse some of my really, really bad photographs, and we can work out what we like about the photograph. But when you're looking at when we're looking at interesting images, we need to work out whether or not they're interesting to you, or they're interested because you're particularly interested in that subject, or whether they're interesting to everybody who's just going to find some sort of appeal to the image. Okay, so we're going to look at the lighting, the story, the composition, whether it's got an interesting character, whether there's anything funny about it, if it's just documentary. What is that interested in the photograph? And we'll jump in now and have a look. So this first photograph I think is crap. I don't even know why I took it. It might even be that it was just a recce photograph just to see if the reflection works. I don't know. But either way, the reason it doesn't work for me is that there's absolutely nothing in the foreground, or nothing obvious for the person to be looking at. There's nothing obvious at all about the photograph. It's just a picture of a cathedral in London, St Paul's. So there's no interest to it. It's a bad reflection. It's bad light. It's a bad composition. The verticals aren't very good. There's like, it's quite busy in the bottom half of the frame. It must have been a recce shot. There's nothing. All these photographs basically are straight from the camera, no editing. All I've done is put a classic chrome thing on there, classic chrome Fuji profile. That's all I've done. And dropped the shadows a little bit, added a bit of contrast. That is it. It's just so we can see the raw. They're uncropped. They're just straight from camera. So as we go through on to the next one, so obviously that we'll all agree is a poor photograph because there's nothing interesting going on it at all. Next photograph, just two people walking down the street. Is it interesting? No. We see this all the time. Yes, you've got arrows pointing in the direction of the people that are walking, but does that make that interesting? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know why I took the photograph. She looks like she's been out and done a load of shopping. Is that interesting? No. I don't know. It's just somebody walking down the street to me. The arrows don't help the composition at all. So next photograph. It's just a guy standing having a cigarette. Is that interesting? Maybe it is to you. I don't know. To me, I don't know why I took the picture. You can only just about see the smoke coming out of his mouth. It's just a bad photograph. I don't really see any aesthetic to it. The lighting is awful. Don't know, just a boring picture. It's just somebody having a cigarette. What is interesting about that? I don't know. Maybe in 100 years' time that picture might be interesting, but then would it be more documentary as opposed to street photography, because we'll be documenting the way we live. So somebody going through nice light on a bike. Is it interesting? No. The light is interesting, the composition's interesting, the subject's too far away. They're not even a strong part of the photograph at all. I don't know. The idea's there. And it's good that sometimes you can see these scenes, but no, it's not an interesting photograph. I don't really like the composition. The vanishing point goes off to the end of the frame. The light's the best thing about it, but it's not a good photograph at all. I wouldn't bother editing it. It's yeah, I don't know. It's nothing interesting. Perspective's quite nice in the ceiling and stuff like that, but it's not really an interesting photograph. I think I'd leave that one. Now, I love the lady. The lady is fantastic. I find her very interesting, but the composition is terrible. And if she wasn't running down the stairs at 900 miles an hour, I might have stopped her for a portrait or something like that, because I do find her very, very interesting. So yeah, she's a very, very quirky looking girl. So I find the subject interesting, but the composition is terrible. Yes, we could crop down that right hand side and get rid of that nasty bit of light and everything like that, but it's just a poor photograph. There's just like, it doesn't look like there's any effort. There's no intent. I don't know if you're looking at it, whether or not you think it's interesting because she's interesting. I don't know. It's just, to me, it doesn't work. There's no balance. There's just just the right hand side of the frame is useless, basically. You could crop it portrait if you wanted to, but that's just a picture of a funky girl running downstairs then, isn't it? So, yeah, this picture could be interesting. The geometric aspect could be interesting. So I could turn that black and white, add a bit of punch to it. That might make that photograph interesting, but there has to be more to it than that. The subject isn't big enough. It's all about the shapes, all about the geometry. And is that street photography? Street photography is supposed to be a bit more about capturing interesting or random acts candidly. It's not supposed to be about creating geometry, really, is it? So for me, it's not really an interesting photograph. I think once I've seen it for a couple of seconds, I'm just happy to skip that one. I like the shadows, I like the tones, I like the shapes. I don't know. The idea, when it's one of them ones that when I took it, I thought, wow, this is great, really exciting. But no, a year later, not so much. Now, I don't know what I was thinking of. The guy's wearing an orange top, the sign's orange, there's chickens in the window. To me, the chickens in the window are more interesting than the guy standing there with a trolley. Do not understand what I found interesting about that shot at all. He's interesting, marginally. He's got his headphones on. I don't know. Yeah, it's just a boring photograph of somebody stood there with a trolley in a doorway. This photograph, he's interesting. I like the light, I like what he's wearing, I like the pose, but I don't know. It's just a guy on the phone, but then in years to come, that's documentary then, isn't it? In years to come, that's going to be important. That's going to be important, I suppose. So in a way, documentary, borderline street photography, which is it? You know, you got to know your chickens. You got to know what you're trying to achieve. So to me, it's not. If he'd looked up at the camera and I'd have seen some sort of eye contact as he noticed me taking the photograph, I probably would have been drawn to it a bit more then. These guys look like they're having an argument. I don't think they were. I think they were friends, but they're speaking Chinese or something. I didn't really understand what they were saying. So the guy in the background looks. At the time, I thought it was an interesting photograph, but he looks away from the conversation. He doesn't look involved at all. So to me, it's like he's not interested at all. So it doesn't really draw you into the photograph. So to me, it's not an interesting photograph because the guy does. He's a really he's an interesting looking chap. But I don't think he actually makes anything in the image at all. I think it's a bit, disjointed. Just a reflection. I mean, how many times are you going to see reflection shots and think, well, they've got to be brilliant. They have got to be brilliant. A reflection shot has got to be absolutely on the money for me for it to even be bothered now. I think in years to come, when I go through all my images, I'm going to have so many reflection shots and I'm really going to have a lot to cull, and I'm going to be looking for really, really quirky, very, very well composed reflection shots for them to be of any value in the future. So I just don't find that interesting, and I wouldn't say it's a bad photograph, quite a nice photograph. It obviously needs cropping out that lampshade, that lamppost in the background, that traffic light thing in the background. But yeah, it's just a easy cliche reflection shot. Not really interesting at all. Guy on the bus, documentary more so than street photography. It's not interesting other than the fact that he's wearing a mask, and in years to come these photographs might be of interest then, but absolutely no way now is that interesting to me, especially we're fed up with seeing sites of pictures of masks. So there's absolutely no way that I find anything interesting about that at all, because it's just a guy sitting on the bus, the windows aren't steamed up, the light isn't creative, there's no interesting element to it. It's just a guy on a bus with a mask, and we're fed up with seeing that. Right, a lady walking down the street. The light's fantastic. I love the shape. I love the geometric aspect that she's in that square. I could edit it to make it look quite funky. I like the simple, almost monochromatic colour. Just the black, the slight hint of brown to the photograph. But it's just, again, somebody walking down the street. How many times are we going to see people walking down the street? It's just not interesting. Unless they were doing something funny, as they were like skipping and doing something flamboyant. I don't know if you're ever going to see that. But it's just a boring shot of somebody walking down the street. So, right, so these images I do find interesting. I do like these, and they're going to go in the blog. So why are they interesting? Well, I love the reflection. I love the scene. I love the balance. This was taken in London the other day. As in the city, and I like the composition. I just think this has some strong perspective. The tree adds a nice frame. It's a flipped shot, so you've actually got the sky at the bottom. The silhouette's really strong on this one. Obviously London with its construction around it in the background. So yeah, that's got some interest. Like the tone, and obviously it's had some editing, but yeah, really like that. Now, the interest for me is the framing. If the guy in the foreground wasn't there, it would just be a guy walking across the wall in the background, reflecting on the wet floor. Well, this works because of the frame that the guy's placed in the foreground. That's really interesting. I think that sub-frame really works. So that is the only reason this photograph works. And the umbrella in there as well, which works really well. I really wish it didn't have the National Gallery sign in the background, but anyway, it is what it is. But yeah, I do like that photograph. I think the guy both having the same shaped legs in the picture as well makes that a really interesting shot for me. Now, I like what this guy's doing. He's sort of taking down these lanterns from Chinatown, and I think what he's doing is interesting. Just, you've never seen there's loads of them all over the place, and I thought what he was doing was interesting, and I just found that the scene in the background, as you can see, the cherry picker in the background there, I found that quite interesting. So yeah, I like that photograph. I like seeing somebody doing something you've not normally seen. I don't know. This guy on the phone next to a phone box. The light's lovely, the composition's nice. The old versus new with the phone box. It looks like he's actually leaning on the phone box. He's not. I should have given it a bit more separation there. Stood to the right a little bit. But the light's great, and the story's there. Just don't need the phone box anymore. The guy's on a mobile phone next to a phone box. I think that I find that interesting, comical. What the guy's wearing is going to be useful in years to come, because we won't see what the workers are wearing. But that's borderline documentary, not street photography. Annoys me that the telephone box is on the wonk, but I like the photograph. I find that interesting, and obviously this is hardly any editing. The shadows might have been dropped. I'll probably just get rid of whatever that little sign is there, but the light is very interesting on that one. A guy in a cafe, don't know what he's doing to that dog, but it looks like he's looking up in his backside. I found, as soon as I walked in, snap, I was still metered for outside. Luckily, he was sat by the shop window, so that's interesting, because you're like, what on earth is the guy doing? It's got an element of what on earth, and it's comedic as well. So comedic? I don't know what that is. The shadow. Now, flip shots, you do them all the time, and this one I really like because it's interesting. I love the holding hands. The little girl's obviously anonymous, you can't see what's going on, and there was again just a slight crop to get the third person out. The dad was to the one side, whichever side it was, cropped him out slightly. Otherwise, I flipping love this photograph. It's really interesting. I think the light and the effect is interesting, the storytelling and the holding hands, and yeah, just really happy with this photograph. Really pleased with that. So I do find that interesting because the shape and the mystery is interesting in the photograph. Don't know what's happened to that one. That lady sitting on the steps, really like this photograph. I find her interesting as a subject. I think she's fantastic. Very interesting subject. Love what she's wearing, and love where she's sitting. Love the pose. Now, this was just obviously street photography is all about candid. Hadn't said a word to this lady. She did spot me taking the picture afterwards, but that is just an unposed photograph. And I just find her and the scene very interesting. The light's lovely. The whole thing I find very interesting. Love the composition with this one. The guy in the Panama hat. I think the scene is really interesting. The statue of David in the background, Panama hat in the foreground. It's borderline a travel photograph, but I really do find the light and the story of the guy enjoying the statue really interesting in this one. So it's got a nice aesthetic look to it. It's really nice, and yeah, I like the balance of the hat in the foreground. Find these funny. There's a few of these. There's two photographs like this. Find these ones funny. So obviously they're supposed to be aligned up with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but I found it funny that they weren't. So I positioned myself to make sure that they looked like they were just doing some random poses. So to me, these are interesting because of the fault that I intentionally put on the photograph. So they're funny. I like the light. I love the light on them. Yeah, I just find it's an obvious story. It's just like you can see what the photographer's trying to do. You can see that I'm trying to make it intentionally awkward. I do find them funny. Now this would just be a photograph of a lady walking down the street if it wasn't for this arrow. Now this was a sign that I found on the other side of the road, which had like a bit of a notice underneath it telling people where to go. And if it wasn't for that sign which had a cutout in it, it would just be somebody walking down the street. And I really, really like the arrow pointing in the direction of the lady's going. I like that it emphasises the orange in the scene. But it's just that shape, like with the photograph of the legs, just adds a foreground interest to the scene. And it just gives it that new dimension. If it wasn't for that arrow, it would just be a lady walking down the street. And I would not find that interesting at all. So that arrow has made that scene interesting. So yeah, just a silhouette walking down the road, but I like the perspective, I like the light, I like the scene. I think the tones are interesting. I think the human element's interesting, but the scene is interesting. It's got a lot going for it. We'll try and skip through a bit quicker. This was interesting. It's funny. I heard these noises above me and I looked up and seen this little fellow above me. So I found him funny. I like the geometric aspects to the picture on as well, and I like the composition. Obviously, when I edit it, I'm gonna Photoshop that out and probably, I don't know about the thing on the left. I don't know. You're supposed to leave these things in, aren't you? Really, really like this guy. Love the balance, love the lights. One of my favourite photographs. I love the story of him sitting there chilling in London by St Paul's Cathedral. The light's fantastic. The zigzag goes pointing up to St Paul's. But I think the whole scene is interesting. The light, the composition, the balance, where he is. I think it's just a really interesting balance, and I really, really am drawn. I like the way he's positioned nicely. You've got the line pointing, lots of lines pointing up to St Paul's as well. So it's just an interesting thing. And also for me, the geometry I've got right with the horizontals all being horizontal pretty much as well. So yeah, strong compositional interest for that one. Alright, so this photograph, I've got a guy admiring a staircase. Now the geometry is stunning for me. I love the way it comes in from the corner. The shapes are interesting, the tones are interesting. The guy's appreciating what's going on, and I'm appreciating him appreciating it. So I find the balance, the shape, the light, the edit, the tones, I find it all very interesting, very aesthetic, but not so much about the street photography. I think this is almost about the art, the fine art aspect of the image. But yeah, I really, really do like this photograph. So, human element. This one hasn't got a person in it, but I find it funny. It's just an interesting, funny, candid shot. Obviously, the human element being a motorbike, which has pissed everybody off overnight. I find this funny. It's just a different photograph, and it's sort of thing like funny and humorous shots I need to look for. And I find them interesting when you're going back, because it's not about the light, it's not about the technical aspect. If this was underexposed or overexposed, it wouldn't really matter. It's just still got a funny story to it. So I find this really, really interesting. Now this shot, there was that other shot where the guys were just standing there looking the other way, and it wasn't interesting at all. But the fact that these guys are having a selfie in the same scene, and then you got this chap on the left who doesn't want to get involved, I found this scene quite interesting. I'm not sure if he's trying to hide from the photograph or what, whether he's trying to get in the back there, I don't know. But I do find this interesting. I find the poses interesting. Obviously it's just funny that he's just more interested in taking the scene in actual with his eyes as opposed to looking at it through a phone. So I do find that interesting, and yeah, quite like that shot. So it's got something going on about it, and obviously it's more about these guys here than it is about Big Ben, which I've just noticed is at early stages of having its reconstruction in the background there. So yeah, can't wait to see Big Ben revealed again. So yeah, that is it. Do check out the blog. When you're going through your images, just ask yourself, are they interesting? But if you find it interesting, is it something that other people are going to find interesting? Is it something that, you know, is it interesting because it's got like a good story? Is it got good composition? But is the interesting element obvious in the frame? It has to be obvious. It can't be like, oh, we see this frame here. I really like what's going on in the background, like 2 miles away. That person that's falling over or something that you could hardly see. It has to be obvious, and it has to have a point. So when somebody sees the photograph, they have to look at it and go, right, this is what the photographer was trying to achieve. I know why he took that photograph. It's obvious to me. Within a split second why he took that photograph. It's not something I'm thinking, what am I looking at? You know, it has to be interesting from the instant, from the second the person looks at that photograph. It has to be interesting. But if it's not interesting, go through people's pictures, go through my pictures, go through anybody's pictures, your own pictures, whatever. Work out why they're not interesting. Is it the composition? Is it the boring subject? Is there no story? you don't know why you took the picture, or they don't know what the photographer was thinking of doing. Is it not obvious what they were doing? Is it the camera settings? Is the camera settings what detracting it from the photograph? A lot of times we get sort of caught up with camera settings, and sometimes they don't matter. So is the camera settings what ruin this photograph? Is it blurry, and is that why you don't like it, or whatever it is? Is there no story? Is it just somebody sitting on a bench? Is it just somebody having a coffee? Is it just somebody on their mobile phone? Why is that photograph uninteresting and boring to you? But find out, and then write a list, and then go through them images, and then try and work out what it is you're drawn to, and you will find that you'll end up with loads less photographs. Your hit rate will be far less, but you'll have all these pictures that are interesting for some reason. So anyway, I'll leave it there. As I said, if you haven't already, check out F8 magazine. I'll leave a link to that in the bottom, and please do check out my blog as well. I'm going to try and do another blog today, and yeah, let me know what you think. I'm no writer, as you'll find out. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Hope you found the video useful. And yeah, I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.